Thank you. The next item of business is Stage 3, Proceedings on the Civil Partnership Scotland Bill. In dealing with the amendment, members should have the bill as amended at Stage 2, that is SP Bill 57A, the Marshall List. The division bell will sound and proceedings will be suspended for 5 minutes for the first division of the afternoon. Members who wish to speak in the debate should press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. Members should now refer to the Marshall List of amendments. And thank you. I call Amendment 1 in the name of the Cabinet Secretary. Cabinet Secretary to move and speak to Amendment 1, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This single government amendment to the bill at Stage 3 is a minor technical amendment which follows on from an amendment to this bill at Stage 2. That Stage 2 amendment inserted Section 3A into the bill. It provides Scottish ministers with the power to make regulations on changing marriages to civil partnerships. The Scottish Government lodged that amendment to the bill as a consequence of the Stage 1 report on the bill, in which the Equalities and Human Rights Committee expressed its support for the principle of married couples being able to change their relationship to a civil partnership if they wish. The Scottish Government concluded that provisions in this area would be entirely consistent with the principles of equality and access to choice and rights that inform this bill. These same principles inform this amendment. The amendment will allow Scottish ministers, in exercising their powers under Section 3A, to amend Section 11(2)(b) of the Marriage and Civil Partnerships Scotland Act 2014. It's the 2014 Act that a couple rely on if they wish to change their civil partnership to a marriage. The effect of doing so is set out in Section 11. Section 11(2)(b) provides that civil partners changing to a marriage are to be treated as having been married to each other since the date on which their civil partnership was registered. This is generally known as backdating. Section 11(2)(b) limits the potential for backdating only to the date the civil partnership was registered. This may not be appropriate if the couple have changed their relationship before. For example, if a couple start off in a marriage, change that to a civil partnership and then change back to a marriage, the logic is to backdate their relationship to when they originally married rather than when they entered the civil partnership. Amendment 1 will ensure that this can be done. An inability to amend subsection 2b could mean that couples who make such changes could lose or have more limited access to the usual rights, responsibilities and benefits that flow from a legally recognised relationship. Such an outcome would be entirely at odds with what this bill is about, and I move Amendment 1.
Thank you very much. No member has indicated they wish to speak in the amendment. Cabinet Secretary, you won't want to wind up. No, we thought that's fine. The question is Amendment 1 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. That ends consideration of the amendments. As members will be aware at this point of the proceedings, the presiding officer is required under standing order to decide whether or not, in his view, any provision of the bill relates to protected subject matter, that is, whether it modifies the electoral system and franchise for Scottish Parliament elections. In the case of the bill, the presiding officer's view, the provisions of the Civil Partnership Scotland Bill do not relate to protected subject matter. Therefore, the bill does not require a supermajority to be passed at Stage 3. So the next item of business is a debate motion 22115 in the name of Shirley Ann Somerville on the Civil Partnership Scotland Bill. Can invite those members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now. I call on Shirley Ann Somerville to speak to and move the motion. Cabinet Secretary, please.
Presiding Officer, I am delighted to open the debate at this final stage of this bill, which will make civil partnership available to mixed-sex couples in Scotland. When this bill was introduced to the Scottish Parliament on the 30th of September last year, none of us could have foreseen how unimaginably different the world would be at this stage in the bill's parliamentary progress. This bill is about equality and freedom of choice, and it is a testament to the values of these principles that this bill has continued to make its way through Parliament, despite the many difficulties we've faced in the past few months. I would like to thank the Equalities and Human Rights Committee for their careful examination of this bill and for their considered Stage 1 report. In particular, I'd like to thank the parliamentary staff for their support in this process and to commend them for rising to the challenges of COVID-19 and putting in place new processes that have enabled scrutiny of this bill to continue during the public health emergency. And of course, I would like to thank the bill team and my private office staff who have supported me through this process and for facing the challenges we all have had to face of working in different ways during lockdown, and I appreciate all they have done in this respect. I've been heartened to see that this bill enjoys broad consensus across the Chamber and has been through its initial stages with full cross-party support. Such consensus is all too rare, but I think this shows that the principles of equality and freedom of choice can and do transcend everyday politics, and rightly so. Perhaps love in this new form of mixed-sex civil partnership really does conquer all. That view is borne out by the consensus on the bill beyond this chamber as well. The Humanist Society of Scotland, the Law Society of Scotland, Engender, Children in Scotland, the Scottish Unitarian Association, the Equality Network, Stonewall Scotland and the Equality and Human Rights Commission all support the extension of civil partnership to mixed-sex couples. And it's clear from other evidence received at Stage 1 and in the Scottish Government's 2018 consultation on the future of civil partnerships in Scotland that people across the country welcome this bill too. Indeed, one man said in his written evidence to committee, "We are thrilled. The passing of this bill will enable my partner and I to register our relationship in a way we find acceptable." He went on to make it clear that the benefits of mixed-sex civil partnerships go further than simply allowing them to have a relationship that reflects their beliefs, as he says that by allowing our civil partnership, you will help us provide greater stability to our children and greater certainty for our old age. The bill will ensure that couples like this have the right to access the relationship that best reflects their beliefs and which will provide security and certainty for their families if they have them. In doing so, this bill will complete the final piece of the formal relationship jigsaw for Scotland. Marriage is an ancient and universal institution. Recent innovations have changed the landscapes of adult relationships, with civil partnerships for same-sex couples being created in 2004 and the establishment of same-sex marriages in 2014. When the UK Supreme Court ruled in 2018 that the law of civil partnership in England and Wales wasn't compatible with the European Convention on Human Rights in that it prevented mixed-sex couples from entering civil partnerships, it was clear that the time was right to consider a change in the law of civil partnerships for Scotland. We consulted in 2018 on the future of civil partnership, and it became clear that a bill extending civil partnership to mixed-sex couples was going to be the right approach. Mixed-sex civil partnership means that all couples in Scotland will have the same choices should they decide they want a legally recognised relationship. The bill also either puts in place or allows regulations to be put in place for a comprehensive body of law in Scotland governing mixed-sex civil partnerships, including eligibility, registration, authorisation of celebrants, recognition of civil partnerships from elsewhere, and family law matters. At Stage 2, there were 11 amendments to the bill. Most of them addressed minor technical matters, but there were some amendments which related to points raised in the Stage 1 report. Firstly, in the report, the committee expressed its support for the principle of married couples being able to change their relationship to a civil partnership if they wish to do so. The government duly took forward an amendment which will provide Scottish ministers with the power to make regulations on changing marriages to civil partnerships. This is consistent with the principles of equality and freedom of choice that underpin this bill. Secondly, I was pleased to support amendments lodged by Alec Cole-Hamilton on the interim scheme of recognition of mixed-sex civil partnerships in the bill. This scheme will allow mixed-sex civil partnerships from elsewhere to be temporarily recognised as marriages in Scotland until mixed-sex civil partnerships are available here. Concerns were raised about this at Stage 1, given that marriage is not the relationship chosen by couples who will be recognised under the interim scheme. The amendments lodged by Mr Cole-Hamilton strike the right balance between addressing those concerns while taking into account the conclusion in the Stage 1 report on the bill that there was no immediate alternative to the current approach. The concerns expressed about the interim scheme of recognition were, in a sense, simply concerns about when mixed-sex civil partnerships will be available in Scotland, and I want to assure the Chamber that I am committed to implementing this bill as soon as possible, so no one has to wait too long to enter into a mixed-sex civil partnership should they wish to do so. It may even be that some couples in Scotland will be emerging from lockdown with a deepened sense of commitment to each other, and I wish to realise that commitment in the form of a mixed-sex civil partnership. And if they do, then I wish them the very best. I move that the Parliament agrees that the Civil Partnership Scotland Bill be passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Now I call Graham Simpson to open with the Conservatives. Mr Simpson, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We may be in the midst of a public health crisis, but it is good that we're still able to deal with other matters. To some, this bill may not, on the face of it, seem to be the most important matter in the world, but to those it potentially affects, it will be very important indeed. So I'm glad we've found parliamentary time for this. I'd like to record my thanks to the Bill team, parliamentary staff who've worked on this, committee clerks and the committee members themselves. They've produced a bill which can be commended to the Chamber and one which will make a real difference to people. It's not contentious, I don't think so, but there were some issues that had to be dealt with along the way. The bill, as we've heard, allows mixed-sex couples access to civil partnerships, ensuring compatibility with the European Convention on Human Rights. It brings Scots law into line with the rest of the UK, and we support it. The bill's about equality and fairness, and these are principles we should all subscribe to. It's also about choice, having the ability to choose the status of a relationship that you're in and having the same choice as everyone else. By way of background, the 2004 Civil Partnership Act allowed same-sex couples to enter into a civil partnership. This was the first legal means for a same-sex couple to be recognised with similar legal rights as married different-sex couples. 10 years later, the Marriage and Civil Partnership Scotland Act made it legal for same-sex couples to be married in Scotland. This also allowed a same-sex couple in civil partnerships to convert their legal statement to married. But different-sex couples could not form a civil partnership. Civil partnerships for different-sex couples have recently been introduced in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. This followed a ruling by the Supreme Court, already mentioned, that said the situation was discriminatory and incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. That ruling did not apply to Scotland, but it was still entirely right that we address the matter here. And the committee's Stage 1 report said, quote, "Scotland is the only country in the world where same-sex couples can choose between marriage or civil partnership, while different-sex couples only have the option of marriage." We supported the general principles of the bill unanimously at Stage 1. The committee then addressed some issues that had been picked up at Stage 2. There were some important amendments, and I'll touch on some of them. Firstly, Alex Cole-Hamilton is to be thanked for addressing an issue raised at Stage 1, and namely that for an interim period, mixed-sex civil partnerships registered outside Scotland would have been temporarily treated in Scots law as if they were marriages. That caused some concern and risked confusion if you were in that position and moved here. What would your status be? Mr. Cole-Hamilton introduced Amendment 1 that allows couples who have registered civil partnerships from out with Scotland to present as in a civil partnership during the interim period, where they'll have the legal status of married before Scots law is altered. They will receive the same legal protections as married couples while not having to identify as married, and this amendment and consequentially Amendment 2 were supported unanimously. And that would have made Martin Lote of the Equal Civil Partnerships campaign a bit happier than he was at first. He had, quote, "a huge problem in principle that his own civil partnership would be treated as a marriage in the interim period, and urged the committee to either reconsider the provision or have the bill enacted quickly so that the interim period was minimal or non-existent, or a non-existent theoretical issue." Shirley Ann Somerville introduced Amendment 10 that allows marriages to be changed to civil partnerships. This was supported across all parties. Her Amendment 11 extended recognition of marriages that have been converted to civil partnerships in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. This was unanimously supported. And she also introduced several minor technical amendments, also passed with cross-party support. She introduced Amendments 4 to 6, which extend provisions for civil partnerships to be maintained regardless of one member of the couple changing genders, as both same-sex and mixed-sex couples can now be in civil partnerships. And these amendments were supported by everyone. One issue that had been raised earlier has not been tackled, though, and it's worth mentioning again. The bill does not allow for adultery to be used as grounds for ending a civil partnership, unlike in marriage. The Faculty of Advocates and Law Society of Scotland both suggested that this matter would be worthy of further consideration, but there were no amendments that I could see on this, most probably because the committee, understandably, felt it was a matter of divorce law. So in the end, we have a bill that works, that is fair, that is about equality, and will be supporting it at decision time.
Thank you very much. And I call on Polly McNeill, speaking remotely, to open for Labour. Ms McNeill, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm delighted to support this bill at stage 3. Same-sex marriage became law in Scotland in 2014, allowing couples to enter into both relationships while heterosexual couples were only able to marry. It was a milestone at the time in our equality law, and now we have inclusive marriage laws. We've exposed a gap in the law, and I think we have equality now. But some people don't wish to marry for symbolic, cultural or emotional reasons, and therefore it's important to allow the extension of civil partnership. In 2018, the UK Supreme Court found laws around civil partnerships were infringed upon by human rights law by not allowing those in mixed-sex relationships to enter into one. And alongside that, there was a head of steam building in Scotland and the rest of the UK demanding this equality. Fundamentally, for same-sex couples, there is a right to choose between civil partnerships and marriage, and the same choice jobs to be available to other couples. It's important to increase people's choice in how they live their lives and the structure that they choose to live their lives. The bill itself aligns Scotland with the rest of the UK, as civil partnerships for mixed-sex couples have recently been introduced in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. I was impressed that at stage 2, the committee still found good amendments that have strengthened the bill, and Graham Simpson has already welcomed the amendments brought by Alec Cole-Hamilton, which I think had substantially strengthened the bill. The amendments bring forward that allows for an interim period where mixed-sex civil partnerships registered out of Scotland be temporarily treated in Scots law as if they were married. Quite an important amendment. It will give couples legal protections before mixed-sex civil partnerships are commenced in Scotland. The amendment also means that mixed-sex civil partners will be able to present themselves as civil partners and present the relationship as a partnership. I also welcome the Scottish Government's amendment that allows marriages to be changed to civil partnerships, another vitally important way to strengthen the bill. The committee asked the Scottish Government to consider this, and I'm pleased that that suggestion was taken on board. Scottish Government amendments give Scottish ministers the power to make regulation, as we've just heard, that will make it possible for married couples to change their marriage to a civil partnership if they so wish. The bill will mean that couples will have an alternative option to marriage, a legally recognised relationship that brings with it financial benefits. But more than that, it's not simply about the financial benefits and security that many people simply feel strongly that marriage is just not the right institutional for them. I'm pleased at this bill that we are ensuring that those people can be legally recognised in relationships that also have the same benefits, more or less, as marriage flowing from that, and maybe fits more with their personal beliefs and how they want to live their lives. I'm also pleased that as the national pandemic that's presided over our lives in the last 3 months, that the government is able to include and allow wedding plans to go ahead in the foreseeable future. Formalising partnerships can have many important benefits to people's lives. That can promote stability for those who reject marriage and allow them to enter something different. Honouring a commitment to another person is perhaps the main reason for civil partnership, but it does give important status for issues such as inheritance tax, pensions and next of kin arrangements. A change to the law is also an option for people who previously thought that marriage might be a negative experience. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, I'm really pleased to support the bill, the work that the committee have done and the work that the government have done. I believe that we have finally achieved equality in marriage law, and I'm really pleased on behalf of Scottish Labour to support the bill at stage 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms McNeill. I now call Patrick Harvey to open the Greens. Mr Harvey is also speaking remotely. Mr Harvey, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. And as this is likely to be my last speech before the recess, I'd like to put on record my appreciation to Parliament's officials who've also been working in difficult circumstances to enable people like myself to make a contribution remotely. I won't be able to cast my vote when the Parliament makes a decision on this bill, so I'm very grateful, very pleased to have the opportunity to speak and to put my support for the bill on the record. I suppose in a way this speech has been a long time coming for me. Way back when I first joined the Scottish Green Party, one of the first policy motions I ever brought to our own party conference was on family law. This was at a time when the LGBT community was just beginning to consider the possibility that we might get some form of family law recognition. I think in the first session of devolution, one of the first bits of equality legislation that was passed was recognising same-sex relationships. That instance was in relation to the Adults with Incapacity Act, but gradually the possibility for some kind of legal recognition of family status was coming forward. And the motion I took to my party conference did say that at the time there should be cohabitation, civil partnership and marriage, and that all of these legal forms of family status should be recognised on a non-discriminatory basis, open to same-sex and mixed-sex couples. It's really remarkable how far we've come, that that's now such an uncontroversial position that it looks like it's about to be adopted by the Scottish Parliament unanimously. When I was first elected, we were very aware that the UK Parliament was about to begin debating civil partnership legislation for the UK, and that this was likely to be passed by a Sewell motion in the Scottish Parliament, a devolved aspect of family law. But many MSPs, after the bruising encounter with the nasty, vicious, homophobic Keep the Clause campaign in session 1, were unwilling to have that debate. So I lodged a members' bill for civil partnership, not expecting that to become the legislative vehicle, but just to open up some opportunity for debate and scrutiny on the issue in the Scottish Parliament. And that bill proposal, that members' bill proposal, would have ensured that we were human rights compliant from the word go. It was wrong to be able to criticise marriage for being discriminatory against same-sex couples and then introduce a new mechanism, civil partnership, that was also discriminatory from the word go. We shouldn't have made that mistake. But we are where we are. When I proposed that piece of legislation, I really need to stress to members who may have forgotten just how vociferous the reaction against it was. The morning after I proposed it, the front page of the Daily Mail had in big black letters, "Green threat to the family." This idea that such a simple proposition, that every couple, every family should be able to decide for itself what basis in law they want to be recognised in, without any hint of hierarchy, without any sense that one is a better or worse or superior or inferior, but that discrimination is wrong whether you choose to be cohabiting, civil partnership, or married. That was such an extraordinary proposition at the time that a friend of mine gave me the badge that I'm still wearing today. The camera's not close enough for you to see it, Presiding Officer, but it says "hated by the Daily Mail." I still own that badge because I still remember when the issues that are about to pass with consensus today were still such inflammatory and provocative positions that they elicited that kind of hateful response. I'm very pleased that our politics has moved on, that political parties have moved on, and that we can now endorse equality together. And I hope that the principle that was mentioned earlier, that the people who are going to be affected by this legislation are the ones we should be thinking about, will also apply when we debate other equality issues as well, such as the status of trans people who are today suffering the kind of hateful hostility in the media and in politics that my community was back in 2003 when I first debated civil partnership. I support the bill. Thank you very much, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much, Mr Harvey. I now call Alec Cole-Hamilton over to the Liberal Democrats. Mr Cole-Hamilton, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. It gives me great pleasure to support this bill, both as Liberal Democrat Equality spokesperson, but also Vice Convener of the Equalities Committee. And can I put on my record our thanks to the clerks of the committee, all the witnesses who gave evidence, and all those who made our Stage 2 proceedings possible through the virtual world that we had to conduct it. I'd like to record my thanks, as ever, to Tim Hopkins from the Equalities Network, who I think has guided me personally through the foothills of this bill, and without whose expertise I would have really struggled, so I'm grateful to him. Presiding officer, marriage isn't everybody's cup of tea. It's not just that. It represents for some religious or patriarchal baggage that many will seek to rail against. And this legislation will correct an aberration in the legal landscape by which the law recognises any union. And the bill will offer legal and financial protection for both parties in the event of relationship ending, in the same way it does in marriage, in the same way it does in a civil partnership. And the changes we made at stage 2 were really important and went some way to addressing the problems that we've heard identified by witnesses at stage 1 and in other remarks today. And I'm very grateful to colleagues for their kind words on my efforts in that regard, and to the Cabinet Secretary for her cooperation on that score. Because section 3 of the bill provided that for that interim period, mixed-sex civil partnerships registered outside of Scotland will be temporarily treated in Scots law as if they were married. This is to provide them with those legal protections between commencement of section 3 and the commencement of the rest of the bill. But once the whole bill is commenced, those civil partners will be treated as in law as civil partnership and continue to have those protections. But Martin Lote, as we heard, of the Equal Civil Partnerships campaign, explained to us in very compelling terms that this is problematic because people in his situation have specifically chosen to register a civil partnership instead of marrying. In fact, it is quite horrifying to them to be considered as married in any jurisdiction. So he urged that provision be reconsidered, or at least that the interim period for which Section 3 operates be kept to a minimum. However, the committee had to recognise, after lots of debate, that there is no immediate alternative to the general approach taken by Section 3 if we wanted to provide such civil partnerships with legal protection as soon as possible, and we all certainly do. But we amended the bill by unanimity on an amendment in my name to make it clear that although legal protections are provided during the interim period by law in the same way they are as marriage, treating the civil partnership as it were a marriage, this does not prevent the partners from presenting themselves as civil partners and not being married. That's key. And put it simply, and into context, presiding officer, if they were to complete an application form, for example, or for insurance, then they were asked for their relationship status, they could answer legally, as a result of that amendment, civil partnership. Equality before the law, irrespective of sex, gender, identity, or sexual orientation, is a vital baseline against which further progress towards all human equality and rights can be made. The Equality Network claims that, based on the experience of other countries, roughly 1 in 10 mixed-sex couples would prefer a civil partnership to a marriage, with demand coming from couples who would otherwise choose not to get married and become unmarried cohabitants. There's a notable problem with the original drafting of the legislation. It's clear there are some mixed couples who have married but would have preferred a civil partnership had it been available to them. And the same goes for those couples married under a faith from which they have become estranged. So I was very pleased to support the government's amendment, which changed the tenor of the bill so that same-sex couples registered as who were registered as civil partnership before marriage was available to them can change their civil partnership to a marriage, and vice versa now, according to that amendment. I think it's a very important move for equality. I see my time is running out, so I'll only say this, that there are real and legitimate concerns and reasons why people would reject the institution of marriage, and this bill reflects that. It offers all of the legal protections to couples of all genders, all faiths, and of none, and it irons out a kink in the fabric of our more equal society, and I am proud to have been part of its consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr Cole-Hampton. I call Ruth Maguire, please. Ms Maguire.
Presiding officer, whilst my remarks this afternoon are not on behalf of the Equalities and Human Rights Committee, I don't think colleagues would mind me placing on record the thanks of all committee members to the citizens and organisations who contributed their experience and evidence. We're also very grateful to our clerks and indeed all the Parliament staff who supported our scrutiny of this important legislation at these difficult times. We completed stage 2 proceedings remotely. Convening from home was a first for me and wasn't without its challenges. It's in challenging times, so now more than ever that we must make every effort to uphold and promote equality and human rights. Doing just that is at the heart of this bill. Since the introduction of same-sex marriage, same-sex couples have had both marriage and civil partnership available to them. However, mixed-sex couples only have the choice of marriage. When Parliament passes this legislation this afternoon, Scotland will no longer be the only country in the world where this situation still exists, and this inequality of treatment will be eliminated. For me, the most powerful evidence we heard in committee came from personal testimonies of how this bill, in providing more extensive rights and choices, would positively affect people's lives. Extending civil partnerships to mixed-sex couples means children will have greater protections through the legal recognition of their parents' relationship. Young LGBT people will no longer have to fear being outed as gay, lesbian or bisexual if they reveal they're in a civil partnership. And transgender civil partners seeking a gender recognition certificate will no longer need to end their relationship. I'd like to remind Chamber of some of the personal testimony that I shared at stage 1. One cohabiting woman wished the bill had come sooner. She wrote to us, "My partner died suddenly after 28 years together with 2 young children. My children and I are not recognised as a family because we weren't married. I've had to apply for parents' allowance, and 2 years down the line, I'm still in the courts and awaiting my next hearing." Another woman shared, "I've been with my partner for 9 years and neither of us have the desire to get married. However, I've recently been diagnosed with cancer and I want my partner to be financially secure when I'm gone." This legislation would help formalise that. Mixed-sex civil partnerships are necessary to ensure all couples have access to important legal rights that are currently only available through marriage. For many mixed-sex couples, the choice of either marriage or cohabitation is not real choice, but a decision between acting against their own deeply held convictions or accepting a lesser legal position. So this bill is about individuals and the choices they must make, and, importantly, provides real choice. It enables couples to have their relationship legally recognised in a way that's right for them, along with the important legal rights and protections that flow from that. Presiding Officer, the bill as introduced would have created an inequality of opportunity, and I'm really grateful to the Scottish Government for their amendments at stage 2 to remedy that by allowing conversion of marriage to civil partnership. The bill in front of us today advances equality and upholds human rights. I'll be very proud to vote for it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Maguire. And I call on closing speeches. I call on Polly McNeill to close for Labour. Ms McNeill, please.
Presiding Officer, as other members have said, it's a really excellent piece of work. It's a very positive piece of legislation, allowing different sex couples an alternative option, and importantly, there are those changing their gender. Overall, it makes a lot less complicated as well as equal. When Patrick Harvey was speaking earlier, I do recall that he was the champion of the civil partnership legislation at that time, and I do believe he played a very significant role in persuading the government to go down this road. We can only say it's a tragedy that it did take us so long to give some equality, limited equality, albeit to same-sex relationships. I scrutinised the civil partnership legislation at the time, and it was a significant milestone at that point. We did trawl all of Scots law at the time to equalise the law wherever we found marriage was mentioned to ensure that civil partnerships had equal weight in the law. I think we've come much further than that today, because I think we truly have equality in our marriage laws. The law doesn't care whether you are a same-sex couple or a different sex couple. All it's interested in is how to formalise it if you make that choice yourself. That's all that matters, and all that really should matter. Everyone who wants the protection of family law should have it, regardless of the relationship that you have chosen to go into. Presiding Officer, keep my remarks short because there's nothing really more to be said other than Scottish Labour is delighted to support the work of the Parliament at stage 3 in this excellent piece of legislation, and on that, Presiding Officer, I support.
Thank you very much, Ms McNeill. And I call on Maurice Golden to close for the Conservatives. Mr Golden, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'd like to thank the clerks, the convener and members of the Equalities Committee, as well as the Cabinet Secretary, for their approach in producing this bill. There has been a simple motivation behind this bill: fairness, ensuring that every couple has equal access to the same options for legal recognition. The bill has widespread support. The Equality and Human Rights Commission have campaigned for it since 2011. The Equality Network have supported the bill's extension of rights and choices. Engender believe rolling back the rights of one group is not the way to equalise treatment for all. And the Young Women's Alliance support having options of recognition outside marriage. And Stonewall Scotland were concerned that ending registration of civil partnerships would undermine the relationships of same-sex couples whilst limiting rights for different-sex couples. Now, the Cabinet Secretary stated in her opening remarks that this bill is about equality and freedom of choice. I agree. And that consensus, which is often not seen in this Parliament, perhaps rarely, is something that we do enjoy on this bill. Perhaps, as she outlined, because love conquers all. Graham Simpson spoke that this bill is about choice, something we can all get behind. And Patrick Harvey spoke of his pride at the likelihood that this bill would pass from the comfort of his sofa. Ruth Maguire highlighted the personal spoke of his pride at the likelihood that this bill would pass from the comfort of his sofa. Ruth Maguire highlighted the personal tips open to couples in Scotland. A key part of that was ensuring that the extension of civil partnerships to different sex couples, and that such provision was on the same basis as the current same-sex provision. Pauline McNeill outlined why she welcomed that addition. We see that with, for example, the ability to convert partnerships to marriages and the ability to dissolve partnerships due to irretrievable breakdown, just as the same-sex couples can. I also welcome the bill recognising different-sex civil partnerships from Out With Scotland and Alex Cole-Hamilton's amendment at stage 2 to give those partnerships legal rights akin to marriage until those partnerships become available in Scotland. It overcame the worrying predicament faced by many couples and made it clear civil partnerships could essentially continue during this interim phase. Alex Cole-Hamilton called it equality before the law. In the same vein of creating parity, Stage 2 also saw the inclusion of an amendment to allow the conversions of marriages to civil partnerships. It is important to recognise and welcome where the bill has strengthened civil partnerships for all couples, such as the prohibition against forced partnerships. The bill has made progress, but it does reinforce the need for wider, more informed debate on some of these issues, especially when we remember that this bill is correcting a mistake made by this Parliament in 2004 with the original civil partnership legislation. That legislation, like today's, was born out of a desire for fairness, yet in doing so, it inadvertently created an unfair situation for those different sex couples who wish to enter into civil partnerships. I hope all members recognise both the progress made today and that there is still work to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Gold. I call on Shirley-Ann Somerville to close for the Government. Cabinet Secretary, please.
Presiding Officer, I'd like to begin by thanking members who have contributed to this debate and again express how pleased I am that there has continued to be cross-party consensus and agreement on the intention of this bill from its introduction to its final vote today. This consensus stands as clear evidence of the value that this chamber places on rights, fairness and equality in our country. Many members have discussed today, again, the changing marriages to civil partnerships, Graham Simpson and Pauline McNeill included. And I've, when discussing this bill, mentioned equality many times. And I think it is worth mentioning again in this particular context, because it is exactly because of equality that the committee's Stage 1 report supported the principle of married couples being able to change to a civil partnership if they wish to do so, and why the Government was pleased to lodge amendments to follow up from those committee recommendations. We found that changes of same-sex civil partnerships to marriages have worked well, and there's no reason to think that changes of marriages to civil partnerships should be any different. There was also, again, some discussion around the interim scheme of recognition, and again I would pay tribute to Alec Cole-Hamilton for his work at stage 2 on this that did improve this section of the bill. In essence, this will give couples the freedom to use the language of the relationship they choose, while the rights, benefits and responsibilities that flow from their relationship can be fully upheld in Scots law through temporary recognition as marriage. Patrick Harvey did point to a front page from the Daily Mail that criticised his stance on issues of equalities. I have a funny feeling, Presiding Officer, that's not been the only front page that has criticised Patrick Harvey from the Daily Mail, and I'm sure that doesn't bother him one iota. He is right to say that equalities have moved on in many ways since that report page was written, and I commend his work and continued efforts to ensure that that progress continues. Ruth Maguire did talk about the changes that will happen, that will ensure that same-sex couples aren't in effect outed by saying that they are in a civil partnership, and I think that's also a very important point that was brought out during this bill's development. But she quite rightly also brought this debate to, I think, the most important matter, and that's the difference that it will make to couples in Scotland who wish to have their relationship recognised but do not feel that marriage is right for them. And I think it's very, very important that we listen to the voices that this will really make a difference to. I want to take the opportunity to provide some reassurance to the Chamber about the implementation of this bill, should it pass. While I am committed to implementing this bill as soon as possible, this will of course be tempered by the period that we still remain under with COVID-19, and our focus remains rightly on our response to the pandemic. There are a number of implementation tasks for this bill, a Section 104 order and a package of secondary legislation to go through. And I know that might sound like a lot to couples who are keenly awaiting the introduction of mixed-sex civil partnerships in Scotland, but I hope they will be reassured by the fact that we've already taken steps to progress these tasks. Presiding Officer, finally, can I pay tribute to the Scottish Government officials and Scottish Parliament staff who have ensured that despite all of the challenges that we have all faced under the current pandemic, we've had the opportunity to debate, to vote and I hope later to pass this bill. Can I also once again thank the members who have made this such a smooth progress from a government perspective, if only all bills went through so smoothly. But I would finally like to conclude by saying that I hope that we can all be proud that we are introducing legislation that ensures equality to all in choosing the form of legal recognition they want their relationship to be in. Who knows, Presiding Officer, there may even be some civil partnership proposals tonight following this debate. And if there are, then I hope we can all jointly express our congratulations to any couples who have now decided to progress with their plans for marrying or entering a civil partnership, and we wish them the happiest of lives together. Presiding Officer, I want to thank members across the Chamber for their contributions to this debate, and I commend this bill and the motion to Parliament.
Thank you very much. That concludes the debate on the Civil Partnership Scotland Bill, and we'll shortly move on to the next item of business. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item of business, I'm pleased to call Gillian Martin, convener of the Environment, Climate Change and Land Reform Committee, to make an announcement on a report on legislative consent memorandum on the UK Environment Bill. Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Thanks for the opportunity to make this statement to the Chamber in relation to the UK Environment Bill legislative consent motion. I have written to you ahead of this statement, and this letter, along with the committee's report and related correspondence, is available on the committee's web pages. Members may be aware of the UK Environment Bill. It proposes a number of shared powers, that is, powers in devolved environmental policy areas in which both Scottish and UK ministers, with the consent of Scottish ministers, would have the power to make regulations. Members may have heard about these shared powers before. A growing number are being introduced via the current tranche of UK Brexit bills, and a significant number of the SI's committees considered as part of the UK's no-deal exit preparations gave UK ministers legislative powers in devolved competence, some, but not all, with Scottish ministers' consent. When the committee explored this issue, both through seeking views from key stakeholders and taking evidence from the Cabinet Secretary last week, we grew increasingly concerned about the potential number of legislative powers available to UK ministers in devolved competence. Fellow parliamentarians, we're so concerned that we concluded that these shared powers represent a change to the devolution settlement and a significant challenge to parliamentary scrutiny, including impacting our ability to hold the Scottish Government to account on the decisions they make on regulations put to them by the UK Government. With no guarantee of Parliament having sufficient opportunity to scrutinise the content of statutory instruments, we felt unable to make a recommendation in relation to the LCM and agreed that I should raise this issue with all MSPs here in the Chamber. We believe the bill challenges the key principle of devolution in Scotland. We believe it should be the Scottish Parliament which makes primary and secondary legislation in devolved policy areas, and therefore any legislation necessary as a consequence of Brexit in devolved policy areas should be made by us. We feel the LCM does not explain why UK rather than Scottish legislation is required and why UK ministers, with Scottish ministers' consent, should exercise these proposed powers. Furthermore, our ability as a Parliament to scrutinise these regulations and to hold Scottish ministers to account would be very limited. The committee is aware that officials are revising the existing protocol, which would give the Scottish Parliament an opportunity to scrutinise the Scottish Government's proposal to consent to the UK Government exercising significant powers. We conclude that, for the revised protocol to be meaningful, it needs to urgently address the issues around limited information on the SIs themselves and limited time for parliamentary scrutiny of SI notifications. In a report, we also propose the use of the joint parliamentary procedure for UK regulations in devolved competence. The Cabinet Secretary told us this is something the Scottish Government has been exploring. This, we believe, is critical, as it would give the Scottish Parliament a formal role when our legislative powers are exercised by UK ministers. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, the committee does not believe EU exit should be at the expense of the devolution settlement, but that it should respect the Scottish Parliament's role to make legislation in devolved competence and continue to perform its full role in holding Scottish ministers to account for how its legislative powers are exercised.
Thank you very much, Convener. And we're going to move on now to our next item of business, which is consideration of Parliamentary Bureau Motion 22126 in the name of Graham Day on behalf of the Parliamentary Bureau, on referral of an SSI. Could I call on the Minister to move this motion?
Move, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. And I'm minded to accept a motion without notice to bring forward decision time to now. Would the Minister move such a motion?
Move, Presiding Officer.
Does any member object to decision time? No, okay. The question is that decision time be brought forward to now. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. Thank you. And before we actually come to decision time itself, could I just return to the point of order that Andy Whiteman, sorry, it wasn't a point of order, it was actually an observation in his opening remarks in the Local Government Finance Order about the title of that order as set out in the motion. Mr Whiteman was correct that the words were in the wrong order, and the motion has now been updated as a minor amendment changed to reflect the proper title. And so we're going to come to the first question, which is that motion 22114 in the name of Ben Macpherson on the Local Government Finance Coronavirus Scotland Amendment Order 2020 draft be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. The second question is the Amendment 22119.2 in the name of Maurice Golden, which seeks to amend motion 22119 in the name of Fiona Hislop on the advisory group on economic recovery recommendations be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. The next question is that Amendment 22119.4 in the name of Richard Leonard, which seeks to amend the motion in the name of Fiona Hislop be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. The next question is that Amendment 22119.3 in the name of Andy Whiteman, which seeks to amend the motion in the name of Fiona Hislop be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We're not agreed. We'll move to a vote on Amendment 22119.3 in the name of Andy Whiteman, and members may vote now. The result of the vote on amendment number 22119.3 in the name of Andy Whiteman is yes 52, no 12. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed. The next question is that amendment 2211.1 in the name of Willie Rennie, which seeks to amend the motion in the name of Fiona Hislop be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. And the next question is that motion 22119 in the name of Fiona Hislop as amended on the advisory group on economic recovery recommendations be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We're not agreed. We'll move to a vote and members may cast their votes now. And this is on the amended motion. The result of the vote on motion 22119 in the name of Fiona Hislop as amended is yes 52, no 12. There were no abstentions and the motion as amended is therefore agreed. The next question is that motion 22115 in the name of Shirley Ann Somerville on the Civil Partnership Scotland Bill be agreed at stage 3. Members should cast their votes now. The result of the vote on motion 22115 in the name of Shirley Ann Somerville is yes 64. There were no votes against. There were no abstentions. The motion is agreed and the Civil Partnership Scotland Bill is passed. Thank you. The final question is that motion 22126 in the name of Graham Day on referral of an SSI be agreed. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed and that concludes decision time. I close this meeting.